So today we're going to talk a little bit about public cloud security. It's kind of funny that I'm following the nice discussion from AWS, and they have a lot of tools as was just shown to help you secure your public cloud. But what if you're not in just AWS, or what if there's some other things you need? So we're going to just give you some ideas of how some things to implement, because as great as tools are, a lot of time we find it's the people in the process really that are needing to be changed to take on these new challenges with public cloud and security of that. So we did a study. We hired CIS as us, and we kind of sent it out to their members and said, what are you seeing out there? And this was done probably mid last year. And we still found that 1 in 6 organization had a breach due to misconfiguration, which honestly is still amazing to me, but it's true. Just more and more people are moving their workloads to the cloud. More folks are enabling their developers or people who aren't necessarily security focused to do things in the cloud as opposed to the data center. And so that's leading to misconfiguration and breaches. It's not malicious. It's typically just because they just don't know any better. And when we asked a little bit more about why this misconfiguration is really still so paramount in environments, we see that a lot of the time it's lack of knowledge and lack of visibility. So it's not just that folks are getting access to upload or make changes to the public cloud as they need. The security teams do not have visibility into those environments. A lot of organizations I talk to, the security team doesn't have access to the public cloud, yet they're responsible for the security of it. So it's kind of this interesting paradigm that they're trying to manage, where they lack access but are yet responsible. And so this is kind of what we're seeing out there. And again, this is very recent. You can actually download this findings. I have the link at the bottom there. You can to kind of get some of these numbers for yourself, but really it seems like education and training, which we've talked earlier today, and I think that's a general security need across the board. But visibility and education when it comes to public cloud is really paramount. So let's talk about how do you address some of this, and this is kind of our little guide to help you as you move more workloads to the public cloud, and you're trying to understand, who should own what people need to be responsible for, and how do I kind of reduce the risk. And so the first thing you really want to do is to really clarify who is responsible for the public cloud security. And I know that's kind of like a random, you think this is something that most of us would know, but talking to organization, public cloud security seems to live in multiple organizations sometimes. Typically, it's not with your traditional security team. Sometimes it's with your DevOps team or your cloud center of excellence. Or it could be a little bit of both, or it might be the lines of business or developers. I don't know. It really is all over the place, as you can see from the chart. So one of the things you really want to first establish as an organization is who's going to, at the end of the day, be responsible for it. So there are kind of two different responsibilities. One is who's responsible for detecting and alerting on a finding, and then who's responsible for actually making those changes to fix it. So typically your developer is going to make the ones that are going to be responsible for fixing, but who actually gets notified and who needs to do this kind of responsibility, definitely the first thing you want to define in your organization. And again, it could be different for different even clouds or different lines of business, but definitely something you want to initially get out there. The next one is, how do you want to communicate these findings and who should get these alerts, right? You get all this information. Hey, this is misconfigured. This is misconfigured. Who do I send that to? How do they want that? So really establishing a lines of communications. Do they want daily emails? Do they want real-time alerts? Do they want a weekly report, right? What is going to be the right level of information sent to the right people? And you really want to be strategic in what information you send. You don't want to just bombard your teams with lots and lots of alerts that they are either going to ignore or maybe that aren't relevant. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're kind of addressing some of this later. The next thing really is, and this is the one that kind of you saw is probably the number one thing we see is visibility. So the public cloud, as we all know, spins up things really quickly, right? It's so easy for your developers to spin up and spin down workloads, objects, whatever it is, in a couple clicks and they're up. You need a tool that will provide you visibility to those assets in near real time. You really want that information collected and not necessarily using a polling interval. Polling is just not necessarily ideal for that. And so really it's all about getting that visibility and getting the ability to search all those assets across multiple clouds, across multiple, even in one cloud, one region, or multiple accounts, right? These are all really difficult things to do sometimes if you don't have a way of getting all those assets into a centralized product or tool to be able to look across all of them. And so what we bring, right, to address this, right, there's a product within VMware called, it's under the Cloud Health umbrella, it's called Secure State. And what we've done is we really are going after that initial challenge of visibility. And so what we do is we grab all your assets in your clouds, that'd be GCP, Azure, AWS, whatever it is, and we put it into this database. It's a graph database in the back end. And so what that allows us to do is to understand how objects, not only how they're configured, but how they're connected to each other, you know, from a configuration perspective, not a network perspective. And so this all of a sudden allows you to find misconfiguration, how those misconfiguration can introduce risk into adjacent objects, as well as just do a simple search. So I can literally put in, you know, somebody asked about PCI. Well, if I tag something with the word PCI in it, I can put in the word PCI and it would bring back everything that had PCI, not just in the tag, but the name, anything like that. So really allowing you to go deep into your data and look for things that can be difficult to find. And so here's just a quick example. I just did a AWS where I'm looking for anything EC2 that has a public name or property name of public IP address. So basically bring me back all my public IP addresses that are assigned to an EC2 instance. And this is across region, across accounts. Again, this data is there in your, you know, native tools. Sometimes they're just hard to grab easily. So we allow you to be able to do something like that. And I know Log4j, Ron was asking me, you know, how do I address Log4j? Now, we ourselves are not going to prevent, let's say, a Log4j exploit from occurring, but using this database that I talked about where we have all this data, I can create a query into this database and find, you know, places where Log4j might be. So if you're in AWS and you have SSM deployed, which is, you know, looking at the endpoint, I can actually look for an application that has named Log4j. Makes it really easy. Other things where you could put WAF protection or things of that nature. We're just looking to see, do you have the right rule set enabled? And so this is just an example of ways you can quickly and easily leverage this database to create either custom rules or look for misconfiguration or maybe new risks that are been introduced due to a new vulnerability coming out. And just to give you a bit more detail, right? This is the level of details we provide and why it's important to understand how things are connected, right? These are objects within the database, and I'm not going to go through this whole scenario, but really we have a key pair that's shared, and we have, you know, overly, you know, too much access on the left side, internet gateway on the right side. Somebody can go in and possibly move laterally and take over your account. But having this idea of this, how everything is connected, and really public cloud is really about interconnected, right? Everything is connected to something else. Being able to map that is really key to be able to show you, you know, risks that are being introduced and how to address that. As you can see here, we grab details and log data to really give you context around it. And that's the other thing, of course, is it's not just the findings, it's the context around it. And next, you know, again, kind of building on this visibility, most of us are trying to do Kubernetes. And so Kubernetes context visibility is also something that we're looking to help address, and something that we see our customers are trying to deal with, because when you have a Kubernetes environment that's sitting on top of, for example, AWS, how do I connect that data, that Kubernetes environment to my infrastructure? And so here's another example where we're kind of attaching a infrastructure component like an IAM policy statement, which is connected to a Kubernetes cluster account, which is connected to an EC2. So we can give you that visibility to, again, find you risk that may be introduced by the sharing of objects, both from your infrastructure and Kubernetes. So that was kind of visibility. I went a little deeper because that's really where we kind of play with a lot, do a lot of work in that space. The next thing really, when you're kind of going through this process of figuring out what to do with public cloud, is really to define your standard, right? What is the controls you want? What are the environments you want to address? And what are the exceptions? So a lot of us are really good about figuring out the controls, but a lot of the times customers want to customize that. Our tool actually allows you to do that, but CIS is really a good starting point for most of our customers. They start there, but you do want to customize where that policy needs to be enforced, where there are leeways, and you want a way to have exceptions, or suppressions, as we call it. We actually allow you to create suppression based on tags, roles, projects, accounts, all that kind of stuff. So you can say, if something is, for example, SSH open to the world and this is dev, allow it versus prod. Being able to reduce some of the noise is really key for any kind of program like this. So really think about exception handling and how you want to manage that. And just making sure I'm good on time here. I know my time here is getting short. So the next is detecting vulnerability at cloud speed. So one of the things to think about as you move towards your public cloud is that your tools do not take too long to report their misconfiguration information. Why I say that is you really want to move this information left, right? This whole shift left mentality that people are talking about. Really what that means is alerting your developers as they're spinning up workloads, maybe putting kind of these checks into your pipeline so that you can change behavior, update templates, and reduce your risk. And if you're waiting for a polling interval, or if you're not getting these alerts to your customer or your end user in a quick manner, it kind of becomes useless. We had a customer who was telling us that their SOC was taking 3 days, sometimes, if not longer, to be able to go through all the alerts and then finally send this information to the developer who deployed, whatever application that was, misconfigured. The problem was the developer said, by the time I got this alert, I was 4 builds down, and I don't, that alert is irrelevant to me. So it really didn't work for them. So really, when you want to talk about speed of detection, it's not only that, it's speed plus distributed alerting, right? You want to get this information, but you don't want to necessarily send it all to the SOC. You want to grab it and send it to the appropriate users so they, again, can destroy what they built and maybe build it properly and update their templates. And then, I know I said 5, but I'm going to actually give you 2 more things to also think about. And this is really about building guardrails, and which was talked about, and really about automation and remediation. So do think about, when you are implementing something to help you with your public cloud environment, what do I have to still manually do? What can I implement guardrails for? What can I automate? Because if you try to do it all manual, you're never going to stay ahead. And so a lot of customers are still very hesitant to do anything in an automated fashion, even though we're all automating deployments. So with that, I say, go for low-hanging fruit that are not going to affect your production. So a lot of times customers, for especially AWS, S3 bucket encryption. That's a great automated guardrail that you want to do. You don't necessarily want to stop a build, but you might want to have a tool out there. We, of course, offer this capability that will go and encrypt enable encryption on that S3 bucket as it's being put out there or created, so that every other, objects that are written to there are encrypted. It doesn't affect production. It won't affect, how things are used, but it's a control that you can have in place. So think of that as you're rolling things out. And as you get more comfortable with your security team and your developer team, hopefully there's a nice communication. You can work towards automating some of these remediations and guardrails in place. So just an example. Here's some suppressions that we can do. There's some, fine grained alerting. So again, you don't want to alert on every finding for your end user. You want to be specific, or maybe you want to enable remediation. So here's an example of some remediations that we can do around ports and things of that nature. And just lastly, right, this is where the Valhalla of everything, that whole shift left, DefSec Ops, whatever you want to call it. It's really about putting more security checks into the pipeline so that your developers update their templates, don't introduce new risk, and hopefully you're moving toward a more secure environment over time. And so I'm just going to skip to that. And really, this is where we're coming to, right? This is kind of the maturity model that we see with our customers, where you initially are doing visibility, moving towards the governance, automating, and shifting left. This is the direction we see our customers trying to get to.